Hey peeps!
How's it going, everybody?
It's going good for me. How's it going for you, Bill?
I'm just trying to get the computer up and running
Yeah.
so that I can. All right. Oh, we got one person watching.
Is that us? We're looking a little crooked.
Yeah. Well, welcome. We're here in the Cave of Wonders, the
I
den
thought it
of
was Studio One.
Studio One.
What do y'all think of the new studio? Yeah.
Looking pretty good. Appreciate all the comments and everything.
So what are we doing today, Bill?
We're going to talk about epidemics.
Ooh.
Actual epidemics. And actually, we are. This Facebook Live is actually pretty cool because I have Bekka from Bekka's Planet with me.
We're doing a collab.
It's a collaboration of.
Well, I might as well bring my
History.
expertise in when it comes to herbs and in how the plague was tended to herbally.
Yeah.
Got plenty of notes.
Plenty of notes.
Where
All
are we
right.
starting?
Well, thanks for joining us, Lois.
Hey, Lois.
It's always a pleasure to have you on here with us. All right, so I'm going to start off by, first of all, telling you out there in Facebook land what an epidemic actually is. So an epidemic is a widespread occurrence of an infectious disease. Now right there, that tells you that it has to be an infectious disease in order to become an epidemic.
Okay.
So a virus is not an infectious disease, yet sometimes it's mislabeled through propaganda and media and
Fear mongering.
to use the word like epidemic and pandemic. Pandemic is the same as epidemic except that it is global and not regional. So
Okay.
epidemic would be more regional, pandemic is global, and it is of an infectious disease. So a virus is not a disease. A virus can be fought off by your immune system or an immune booster. And once again, that's why we have an herbalist here with us today to kind of explain the different remedies that were used throughout the centuries on the different pandemics and epidemics that they like to call them.
The interesting thing is how you're identifying that, epidemics, pandemics, and stuff like that as an infectious disease. I may be wrong, but I don't think there is very many infectious diseases, if there's any, because a disease is what we would consider a dysfunction of the body. So that would be something like diabetes, even though that's actually your body functioning correctly, we consider it a dysfunction.
Correct.
Heart disease. That would be a disease. That's not infectious.
Hey, Mandy.
Unless you're wanting to consider the food that we eat and supply everybody here in the U.S. as a carrier of that disease, because that's where that disease comes from.
Right. So let's start off. Let's start with 165 AD. There was the Anton smallpox epidemic. I'm going to say it's an epidemic because it was roughly just in Greece that it was taking place, but 5 million people did die of smallpox in 165 AD.
Yeah, which that is the first known smallpox, I guess, out of the ease of using a word.
Right.
Epidemic.
And it is, and you have to put in consideration that is about the time that trade is really taking off. So something like smallpox, chickenpox, measles, mumps would have spread very rapidly through the trade industry, and it's something that has a long gestation period. So you could be a carrier for weeks, and that'd get you time to get on your camel and go to the next community and
pass it
along. And then by the time that you actually showed symptoms and stuff, you'd already infected a third of the continent at that point. So uh-oh.
Did I do that?
And that was only 5 million people that died of smallpox. So
yeah, what they think is smallpox, and they contribute that particular plague is what they call it, but that particular illness as the start of the downfall of the Roman Empire.
It is. All right, I guess the next one would be what, the Justicine plague?
Yeah.
Which is actually the first time that the bubonic plague makes its ugly appearance into Homo sapien or humans. It was in the Justine plague, which is 541 to 542, and it only takes out 25 million people. That is 40% of the world's population, and it is the first time that the pustulous boils formed and oozed out their pus and nastiness all over the place. And
can you get any more descriptive?
oh, but the smell. Oh man, can you imagine the stenches of these things? So that was the first time the bubonic plague reared its ugly little head, and it only killed 25 million people.
Yeah. Well.
In a year.
Yeah, and you have to think actually how many people were.
That's 40% of the world's population.
Right,
at that time.
and that it wasn't. Well, and it's the world's population as we know it.
Hey, James.
So that doesn't even cover
indigenous people in North
of
America.
The Americas. That doesn't affect them because they're not part of the world population yet.
Yeah. So when you say world population at that time, you're talking about the Mediterranean, Europe, that kind of area, stuff like that. But then we come to the one that everyone should know about. The world famous...
The Black Death.
Black Death. Like death metal. Boom, 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 boom. So...
No, like plague doctors.
Plague doctors, they became very crucial. I mean, the Black Death takes place over roughly 15 to 20 years. Between 1346 and 1353-ish. And it kills 200 million people, which is 50% of the world's population. So, if you think that only 1,000 years before, the same disease killed the same infection killed 40% of the world's population. 1,000 years later, there's more people, and it kills 50%. So if you're alive today, that means your ancestors survived the Black Death.
Right.
And that is something to be proud of.
And that's something that, pardon the pun, that plagued Europe for centuries. You know, all the way until the mid-1700s, that plague kept coming up over and over again in different pockets. So, really, yes. If you're here today, then you're a stronger person because at least one or more of your ancestors did survive that.
Yes, they did. Well, the thing about the Black Death, the bubonic plague, which actually towards the end turned to the pneumonic plague, which is the respiratory infection. So basically, pneumonia. You end up with pneumonia, your lungs filled up with that same pustulous, wonderful stuff, and you choke to death on your own fluids. The Pope Clementine at the time, he had made a decree that all cats and dogs to be taken rid of and getting rid of, executed, murdered, to the point where they had a bounty on dogs and cats throughout Europe, which was ordered by the Roman Catholic Church. And this is where we come back to cats being bad luck, which we covered in another episode.
Right.
So what it did is, instead of stopping the spread of the bubonic plague, it actually increased the spread of it because there was nothing alive, no natural predators roaming around that were eating the rats in the towns, that were carrying the fleas into the homes. And so once again in history, we're this close to solving a problem and we take a wrong turn. And that's the reason that the death toll got so high so quickly.
Right.
Besides the fact that commerce between nations was very well established at that time. You had major cities like London where people were living in small cramped areas and the filth in the streets, and so it was just a breeding ground for rats and rodents.
Well, and if you think about it, they were closing up or locking in the people.
Right.
Well, this was before plumbing, so you still have to pee and poo. You still have garbage. What are you going to do with all of that? Well,
Just goes in the street.
Now, well, if they're locked up in the house and can't even throw the bucket out the window, then
It increases the problem.
Yeah,
It multiplies it.
Because now you're sitting in your filth, and literally in your home. It's death sentence.
And they thought it was two things. One of two things. It was because you were a sinner, or someone in your household was a sinner. That was one. That it was God's wrath upon you. And it was so believed in that you had monks and friars that would walk around and flog themselves to their bleeding in the streets, trying to relieve your sins through their pain and suffering. The Dark Ages were an amazing time, and I can't wait till I get to cover the Dark Ages in depth, but this is our little snippet of that. So, as you seen a minute ago, Red here, she had this mask.
This is the plague doctor's mask. And what they would do is, this particular one doesn't have a cover over the back, but they would have like a little pocket in there, and as they wore it, they would have different herbs that they would stuff in that pocket. And the herbs that would have been used would have been common herbs that everybody would have been growing in their gardens. Most of the aromatic herbs you really wouldn't be able to go wrong with, whether it was rosemary, thyme, rue is another herb that was commonly used. I saw references of whorehound, which I kind of disagree with that. Because whorehound's more of an herb that you want to take internally for chest congestion and things like that. It's not that aromatic.
Well, I mean, what was the thought of? The terminology is missing my brain here.
Miasmas.
Miasmas.
Yeah, miasma is the nasty smells of the community, whether it come from swampy lands, shitty streets, they just threw their refuge or their chamber pots and stuff like that out in the street. I don't know if you've ever heard of the saying garde-loup. That is them actually giving you the warning that they're fixing to throw crap out into the street. So guard a loo. There's a loo. They're throwing the stuff out of the loo into the street. And that's where different customs of the women, they walked on one side and the men walked on the other side, because the men would take the brunt of the loo if it got thrown.
Walk around with pissy shirts on. That's awesome.
Yeah, and the parasol as well. That was used as a guard to protect yourself from the loo.
Yeah. So back to what'd you call it again? It's a
miasma.
Miasma. So the thought process behind that, once again, it's one of these things, man. We're so close,
yeah.
But yet we take this hard left. So they would actually take the herbalist in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So like her job would be to she would wear a large like leather coat, long leather coat, a full brim hat, that mask, full with the herbs like she just described, gloves, and thick pants, like canvas pants, and she would go in to clean out the homes after the 40 days. I did not tell y'all so quarantine means 40 days, by the way. So you'd have to stay in your home for 40 days. They'd actually padlock you in and put a big red X on your door. So they had the comprehension, but not quite there. So the plague doctor's job was to go in and to remove the corpses out to the people with the bell.
Ding!
We have the bell. So they would remove the corpses.
There would be somebody going through the street, actually ringing a bell. Bring out your dead. Who's heard that before?
So, as the herbalist, her job was to go in, to remove the bodies, and because of the wonderful outfit that she would have wore at the time, the fleas couldn't get to her. They thought that it was because of the herbs that were shoved down into the beak of this, because of the
miasma.
I'll eventually learn how to say it. It's in the head, but so after they removed the bodies, their next job was to purify the house. And so they didn't have Clorox, bleach, there was no Febreze, there was no, Wikipedia for them to go and figure it out.
Those things actually don't work anyway.
Well, there was nothing for them to do except use the knowledge that they had of herbal remedies. So vinegar, which we have some homemade vinegar here.
Everybody would have known how to make their own vinegar.
So vinegar was used a lot, and then they would burn herbs like sage and other herbs, not to actually cleanse, even though they were cleansing with them.
Correct.
It was because they thought it was the smell that would cause the next family to move in to that apartment or bungalow or whatever, that they would end up getting it. When in fact, it was the rodents living in the thatched roof and eating the filth and stuff throughout the town that was spreading it around.
Well, and I would like to put a little asterisk here. He's referring to me as an herbalist. Yes, I am an herbalist. I am a 21st century herbalist. I would not have been considered a doctor of the time.
She would have been a witch.
Yes, I would have been the witch.
I could have been the doctor.
Or a healer. And there's different names for the female healer of the time, wherever you're at. But the plague doctors, the herbalists of the time, those would have all been men. Unfortunately, women are considered ignorant. They can't learn. They don't know anything about the world. And us women know different, don't we?
There's no women listening to you.
So they can answer
kidding.
later.
I'm just kidding.
No, there's
Don't hang the messenger. All right.
Lois is on.
Lois? Oh yeah, Lois is still there. So are we done with the Black Death? Can we move on? Is there anything else you want to do?
Well, one of the things that has been passed on from the Black Death, if you get into herbalism or even essential oils, something along the natural healing, it won't take you long to hear about the vinegar of the four thieves.
Oh, yeah.
Or nowadays it's called the oil of the four thieves, especially if you get into some types of essential oils. But interesting thing about the vinegar of the four thieves, it's now considered a folklore, and I didn't even take the time to try to track it back to original source. I figured it would be too much time and really at this aspect not even worth it. But if you look up online, you will find a plethora of different recipes of the vinegar of the Four Thieves. And the story behind the Four Thieves is these were thieves that were going into these houses during the Black Death or the Plague and stealing whatever they could off the dead bodies. And when they were caught, they had the choice of getting hung or confessing of how they were able to continue to go into these houses time and time again.
How desperate do you have? Put yourself into these people's position, though. Not to interrupt, but to interjourn here. How desperate is your life that you are? One, you're stealing from people. All right, so we know that that's uncalled for. But two, you're stealing from something that you know that you could die. Like nobody's making it out. If you got one of these pusculous boils under your armpit or in your groin, and that, by the way, that's where they first start, is in your groin or in your armpits.
And they could be sizes of apples before they
roughly
burst.
Yeah, roughly about the size of an apple. Very painful, and then they would burst and it ooze out, and it's great. So anyways,
no mashed potatoes for dinner, please.
I could taste it like almost in my mouth. If none of y'all have ever watched Dr. Pimple Popper, she's ruined any of that stuff for me.
Imagine a pimple like the size of that you would be able to hold it in your hand.
And it's just, but it's black because your blood is curdling in there and just.
And it smells.
And then
the miasma is awful.
And then you are so desperate that you are like, you know what? Screw that lock. Forget that little red X. They can't do anything. Get your homeboys together and y'all go in there and rob them blind before the herbalist can when he goes to clean the bodies up. Because that's how he got paid, by the way.
Well, and they eventually got caught, and their sentence was to go bury the dead bodies. I love the karma that just kind of thrown at them. You know, they did give up the recipe. And the recipe is said to be in the court records, but, you know, like I said, you know, it really... To me, it really doesn't matter because all of the recipes, once you know herbalism a little bit, it's all the aromatic herbs which would be beneficial in those aspects. You know, some of them I could argue with, I doubt they had. You know, like one of them was lemon. You know, in the Middle Ages in England.
It's Dark Ages.
Oh, well, okay. In the Dark Ages in England, I doubt thieves had access to any lemons that might be available.
Well, on another note, rosemary was roughly a shilling for a parcel of rosemary at the beginning of the bubonic plague. By the end of the bubonic plague, a shilling would buy you one little stalk of rosemary. That's how into this whole idea of the smells was causing the issue.
In that particular instance, it became a fad afterwards to have an herb garden right there at the front door, and it would have had things like rosemary, lavender, sage. Let's see, I'm trying to look at my list real quick. You know, just your aromatic herbs, and they would have been right at the front door. And the reasoning behind it would have been because of the plagues. Any person worth their salt, you know, worth their weight in salt, would have had a garden right in front of their door. Whether it was just a little pot, you know, or a little planter right there at the door, or an herb bed. And that's where eventually the English aristocrats create these huge gardens that you walk through to get to the house. You know, that's kind of where the beginnings of all of that come from.
All right. You done with the bubonic plague?
I'm done.
All right,
Go ahead.
because we are out of the bubonic season now, and we are moving to another upper respiratory infection called cholera. So the cholera pandemic, it happens in 1852 to 1860, and its death toll is only 1 million people. Do you have any home remedies for cholera?
Clean up your act.
Clean up your act, I like that. Don't cough on me.
Don't cough, but make sure that you keep as much fluids in you, and make sure your water's clean, because cholera comes from dirty water.
Yes, it
Contaminated water. And once they found where the contamination was, they were always able to contain after that. But it would have gone wild until they figured out where the contaminated water come from.
Right. Okay, so moving on from cholera, our first flu pandemic. The first flu pandemic, which is known as H2N2, in lesser known communities, it's called the Russian flu. It kills 1 million people, and it happens between 1889 and 1890. It starts in St. Petersburg and gradually moves on through there. Now, if y'all are familiar with world history, y'all will know what's going on in that year, 1889 to 1890.
What is it, Bill?
Nothing. Because y'all gotta go look it up, not me.
Oh!
I can't tell you all the answers. All right. Now, this next flu pandemic, it spreads like wildfire. It is ridiculous how quick this pandemic actually happens. And I'll tell you the reasons why, and I'll tell you the myths behind it. So, it is called the Spanish flu, and it happens in 1918. Unfortunately, it does not start in Spain. Spain was the only ones that wanted to report the actual incidences that were going on. The United States, on the other hand, wanted to kind of push it aside. Well, in 1819, we were in the middle of World War I. Great trench warfare. Yay! So, the first...
Close contact.
Yeah, close contact, muddy, nasty...
Strenuous?
Yeah, strenuous.
Would you say that they were
bad.
strained with
Well, I mean,
with stress?
Oh man, it was stressful being in the trenches. Not only that, but the living conditions were not the most hygienic. And number two, here's the most important thing, is that the food that they were getting was not the best. And so if you're not eating quality food, your immune system gets down.
If you're stressed, your immune system gets suppressed as well.
So, unfortunately, this flu actually starts at Fort Sumter here in the United States. And they thought that, oh, it's just a couple of the guys, whatever. That same platoon gets shipped straight over to Normandy and then to the front line, and put right in the mix. So it spread quickly. Now, this flu pandemic, because it ends up being worldwide, it kills 50 million people. 50 million people in 1 year. That's a lot of people. It actually killed more people than what World War I had killed. And it was spread between the populace in France and then out through Germany into Belgium, England, the United States. It was bad. And it all goes back down to not really understanding how viruses are transported. And back to the immune system, the immune deficiencies that were going on at the time. You know, the Navy kind of had something going for them because they were afraid of scabies, so they were always feeding the naval troops vitamin C, whether it be oranges or lemons or there was always some kind of citrus being pushed into them. So the Navy
The limeys.
the navies did not see as much of a increase in death or mortality rates than, say, the ground troops and mostly the guys in the trenches. The guys in the trenches, they took an ass beating with just that.
And as they have studied this pandemic and how it got started and who it affected and things like that, they realized that it affected the early to middle-aged adults. It didn't affect the older adults as much, like 60 plus, and they think it's because they were inoculated from the pandemic of 1889. So that is an interesting tidbit.
Right. And so, that goes back to what I was going to get at, is that the more your body is exposed to these different viruses,
right.
and you also got to think, the flu virus has been around forever, all right? There's different ones, Corona is one of them, the bird flu, the swine flu. These are all versions of the same virus. The difference is that it's constantly mutating. So if you isolate yourself for a long enough time period in a long enough clean, sterile environment, when you actually do get out into the environment, what's going to happen is that the reaction to your body is going to be 3, 10, 100 times worse than if you were just to go through it and build your immune system while you're going through it, and each time that it's changing, your immune system is changing with it.
Right. So if you take yourself out of that equation of life, then and throw yourself back in, it's like your body...
You go into shock, basically.
Yeah, your body doesn't recognize that this is a threat. This new virus is a threat because it's never been exposed to that in any particular form. And that's why they say to go out and eat dirt, let the kids play in the dirt. Don't worry about having such a fantastically clean, scrubbed home with infants, because you want them to be exposed to different bacteria and viruses to be able to thrive in this environment.
Now, I'm not saying go back to the 1500s and let the rats cruise around your house and kill all your cats and dogs.
Yeah.
And think it's some kind of weird superstitious kind of way. We're way past that. But then, on the other hand, don't go to the far extremes and live in a sterile environment.
Right.
Because you're doing just as much harm doing that as you would have done not doing anything at all. So you have to find that happy medium in there. And the best way to do it is through your diet, your health, your activities, that kind of stuff. Be active, be energetic, go eat fresh foods, take your vitamins.
Yeah, fresh foods have bacteria and stuff from the environment. And
swim in the brazos.
I don't know if that's a good idea.
That's how come I'm immune to everything.
How did you not get swept out into the Gulf? Oh my goodness. Stop dancing. You're going to make me puke.
Oh, come on. We got plenty more to talk about.
One of the ailments or one of the remedies that I wanted to talk about that had to do with the Spanish flu of 1918 is asafoetida or aspidity. And the reason I peg it to that time period, even though it's been used all the way back to the medieval times, is that period was a time of, we had been growing in science. And it's before the sulfa drugs, but the doctors have pretty much taken over healthcare and taken it out of the home. But it didn't take us long to get back to nature and back to herbalism in 1918. In every pharmacy, you would have found these everywhere. And this is aspidity. or asafoetida. It's a resin that has been imported from India.
Can you make it smell like something different?
No.
Oh.
One of its folk names is actually devil's dung. And whenever you have a classroom full, think of the one-room schoolhouses with the potbelly stoves.
And no airflow.
And no airflow in the middle of winter, and all kids are wearing this stuff.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah, it would have been
Between that
awesome.
and the BO, I bet it was awesome.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, aspidity was one of those herbal remedies that was brought out in mass. And it would have been at every pharmacy. It would have been kind of like our masks today. That you can find a mask anywhere and everywhere.
If one of our viewers wanted to get some of this, where could they find it at?
Bekka's Planet. You could get a hold of me at Bekka's Planet on Facebook. But
she's got lots more home remedies also.
Yeah, I make aspidity or asafoetida bags for the kids. And my kids, this was a story that was told to me by my great aunt our great aunt, when I first started herbalism, and she found out. She was telling me about her grandmother and how her grandma required all the children to wear these until one year she thought she was old enough that she didn't need to wear it and refused to wear it, and she got extremely sick, and she was the only one in the family that got sick that year. So she listened to her grandmother after that. But so this is one of those old folk remedies that I'm bringing back. But anyway, go ahead.
Where was it? Where were we at?
We were after the Spanish flu of 1918.
So next would be the Asian flu. The Asian flu of 1957, which is another N1, N2 strain of flu, which happens to be the same strain that comes back to pump us in the butt back in 98, I think it was, 98, 1998?
That sounds about...
I think it was
about
1998
right, yeah.
that it actually comes back in, but it's a little bit different. Always. With any of these, they're always just a little bit different. And that's why you always... hold on. So, the flu shot. The flu shot is the strain that's out at that time in a lesser dose, or it's a small dose of the flu, and that helps your immunities build up against that flu strain. And that's why they insist that you get a flu shot every year, yada, yada, yada.
Sorta. It's what they suspect is going to be coming out
I was gonna get
that following year.
I was going to get to that, but...
not.
So they grow it in a petri dish and everything like that, and they think, oh, well, it mutated like this in our petri dish, so this is how it's going to mutate in the world. So the thing about it is that you are accepting the flu virus into you already, so why not just build your immunities up and go with it? Now, I understand, and I completely agree with everyone that has a compromised immune system or can't do that, having to go and take those precautions when it comes to everything.
In that aspect, I never recommend or give the recommendation not to get a vaccine or anything like that, but I do recommend that you educate yourself in the vaccines and vaccinations, and I think with doing that, you will learn that there's a lot more damage to be done in those little tubes than you just living out your life in the real world.
Yes, I agree with her 100%. So, I'm answering questions online, by the way. Sorry. While we're doing this.
So after the Asian flu of 1957, the next plague that they come up with, looking through plague lists and everything, and with these lists, we didn't hit everything.
Oh, no.
We would be sitting here for hours talking about...
and it's it comes down to they especially in the last 100 years, they like to scare the living hell out of you by saying it's an epidemic, it's a plague, it's a pandemic, you're going to die, and then feed it down your throat.
Fear.
What my point across to y'all that I hope you understand is that fear it, but respect it, educate yourself, and move on with it.
Make your own educated decision. But the next one that they come up with is AIDS, which I don't agree is a pandemic in the aspect of the little box that you put a pandemic in.
Well, none of these are actually pandemics.
Right.
Or epidemics.
Yeah.
But that's what they called them forever. And that's the whole reason I started this program off with giving the definition of epidemic and pandemic, because technically none of this that we talked about is either one of those.
Right.
They are just viral infections. Most of them, short of the bubonic plague and smallpox and measles, are an upper respiratory infection that, once again, we're this close to solving, and we take some wrong turn.
And I think in another 100 years, we will see the wrong turn that allopathic medicine has taken the last 100 plus years. Not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. We're all able to make our own decisions, but make your decisions educated and go with it. And be responsible for your own decisions.
So Trooper just asked a question here, and obviously he tuned in later. An epidemic is a widespread occurrence of an infectious virus, or infectious disease, and a pandemic is a globalization of that same infectious disease. And like I was just saying, the disease is different than a virus. And everything that we spoke about, from the bubonic plague to the measles to the mumps to chickenpox to the flu, the corona, all these are viruses, and most of them, short of
bubonic is a bacteria.
Well, it's a bacterial infection, yes.
Yes. But the definition of a disease is what we would consider a malfunction of the body, similar to something like diabetes, heart disease, which your body is technically not even malfunctioning. It's functioning the way it was designed to do. It's just, it doesn't have the tools that it needs to work properly, and is going in a direction that we think is a wrong direction. Yes, it will cause death if we don't reverse our ways, but a disease is, in most circumstances, a disease is reversible.
So that answers the first question that Trooper had asked us. And the second question of that is, what's the difference between that and a viral outbreak, which is actually what most of those are viral outbreaks. And you could say that they're viral outbreaks on a global scale, short of the fact that you have to take into consideration that most of these happen before the Americas are discovered and before people were really commercing with most of Asia and Australia and stuff like that. So when you say global scale, say 528 AD, you're mostly talking about the Mediterranean, Central Europe, and stuff like that. So the next question that just came through before we move on came from Kelly. He says, you might have already mentioned it, but how have socialist societies handled the dead, infected bodies at different times?
Well, the first one, which was let's see, it was the Antonine Plague, which started in, that was the one that started in China, wasn't it?
Correct.
And what they would do with that one, they took the infected dead bodies and
That's also smallpox.
And they threw them in the houses that were infected, and they burned the houses. So it was like a communal crematorium.
That was before we started shoving mercury into our veins to get rid of the...
During like the Black Death and all of those, they would throw the bodies out of the houses, and there would be somebody to come pick up the body, hopefully.
I ain't dead yet.
But most communities would have somebody like I want to say caretaker, but that's not right.
Like a grim...
like an undertaker.
Undertaker?
Yeah, they would come and pick up the bodies and throw them in. Most of the time it would be a mass grave, because they're not going to dig a proper, what we would think a proper, like 6-foot grave in a square, in a little rectangle.
For instance,
for every person.
Talking about that brings up a good thing. The York Ministry in England is actually they had so many people dead, because if you're in England, you're Catholicist, all that. This is Church of England. Sorry, yeah, Church of England, not Catholicism, because of old King Henry and his wonderful stuff that he pulled. King Henry the Eighth.
Depends
So
on
anyways,
what time frame we're talking about.
During the bubonic plague, the bodies were stacking up so quickly that York Ministry actually is to enter it, you have to enter it down, because they built the ground up around it because of all the dead, because they were burying them right there.
Well, and they say that's where the catacombs, or how the catacombs of Paris was created, was after the plague. There was so many bodies that were buried in the grounds of the area that the earth could no longer take it anymore. That it wasn't degrading the bodies, so they ended up digging them up, and of course the bones, they would rot it. Yeah, they would rot the skin off the bones, and then just pile the bones up underneath the city, and that's where the catacombs come from.
Oh, the joy of decorating with human bones.
Oh yeah.
Making pretty little sculptures. It was awesome.
I get to use femurs today.
Yep.
Yay!
So, where are we at?
We talked about the swine flu.
The swine flu?
Yeah, the swine flu.
Swine flu.
Yeah, the swine flu of 2009. How many of you guys that are here remember all of the propaganda of the bird flu and the swine flu and oh my God, we're going to die from this and that? It was like every year.
I went out and licked one of my pigs.
Did you?
Yeah. I actually would hold it and roll. I was like, yeah, I'm going to die of something from my pig. I might as well get it right now. We had pigs at the time.
Yeah.
We did.
Okay.
I wasn't no.
Well,
I ain't no afraid no swine.
I'm glad I'm not the one kissing you at night.
Well, I'm glad you're not kissing me either. Thanks.
But then we even have, like the Ebola outbreak in 2014 and Zika in 15. They're considering all of these.
Well, Zika be Zika comes from mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And so that's your dengue fevers and your
malaria and things like that. Yeah.
Got the dengue fever.
Mhm.
Look at me, I'm turning yellow.
Well, and we didn't even address yellow fever.
Yeah, we didn't address a lot of things. We didn't address the globalization of when the Spaniards came here in the 1500s, the 16th century there, and wiped out, say, 90% of the indigenous people on the continent.
Right.
If you think about that, there were still a lot of indigenous people here by the time we started, putting civilization here, and 90% of them were wiped out in the 1600s, so that'd been like 1528, somewhere around there, when we were looking for gold.
And that would be no wonder the land wasn't inhabitable or inhabited.
Yeah, because we knocked out 90% of them. That didn't even do anything except show up and go, "Hey, this is our land now." Oh, y'all live here? Oh, that's cool. Well, yeah, we gotta go somewhere.
Yeah, just wait a generation.
Hey, where's the gold? Before you leave. Y'all got women, and where's the gold?
Yeah.
What's this black stuff?
To understand that, you gotta go watch.
You gotta go watch our videos on our other channels. So.
No, it's on the same channel. Well, it's on YouTube.
Well, yeah, sorta, kinda, possibly, maybe. It's a possible maybe.
The last time I looked, it was there.
All right.
YouTube hadn't banned us yet.
Not yet, not yet. We like to push the envelope. Envelope. Yeah.
Okay.
But we have a good time at it,
You
though.
haven't had enough to drink tonight, have you?
No, ma'am, I have not. So what else we got? Anything good?
No. Anybody got any questions?
Let's see. Joked about the cat-dog flu coming out after the swine flu. Haha. Yeah.
Yeah, they've pretty much blamed it on every animal now, so why not cats and dogs?
Well, yeah. I mean...
I remember, my son, which he shall remain nameless, as far as...
You have a son?
I've got two. You didn't know that?
No, do tell.
Well, remember when he had his lung issue then come back and ended up with pneumonia right after that? I think it was a pneumonia that he got from the hospital.
Oh, probably.
But the hospital kept saying it was from the chickens my neighbor had.
No.
And my son doesn't touch chickens.
No. No.
I just kept laughing at him.
I'd have to disagree with the medical professionals on that one too. So yeah.
They kept trying to pawn it off on somebody else, but no, he left the hospital with pneumonia.
Well, just think, you're going into a sterile environment full of people that have different viral infections and stuff, and I mean, come on. They're not changing their scrubs every time they leave your room to go to another one's room. Yes, they're changing their masks, they're changing... But, come on. Really?
Right.
I mean, the likability is better that he caught it there than he caught it over here. So, well, do we have anything else we want to talk about tonight?
No.
No?
I don't have anything.
Did you want to discuss anything that you have in this wonderful box of joy over here?
Yeah, this is my traveling apothecary.
It's kind of hard to see, but it's over there.
If
she's a witch.
If I come to the house or to your house and you're looking for a remedy, this is what you would probably see me carry in. This is my 1830-ish apothecary. It's designed off of 1830s apothecary, and of course I have all sorts of herbs here for all sorts of plagues. You know, I have like camphor. Ooh, now talk about aromatic.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that a lot better than these little rock things that you got here.
Oh yeah.
These rock things don't smell good. That smells good.
This does kind of open up the lungs, doesn't it? And another herb that would have been used commonly for remedies of the chest would be this one right here. This is cinnamon. Or, here we go. Who has heard of the wearing garlic around your neck to ward off vampires? There's actually some medicinal value to that. Is garlic is antimicrobial, which means that it wards off all the bad bugs, whether it's a virus, a bacteria, so on and so forth. So this is where, or that is where It comes from warding off evil.
I just like garlic in general.
Yeah.
I like garlic on everything.
Well, you wear garlic around your neck to ward off evil because that's what makes you sick, right? Well, at least that's what they thought. And so that is where the garlic around your neck will ward off vampires comes from.
I need cologne made out of that.
Cologne out of camphor.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
Uh-huh.
I'd be like,
okay.
They call me Camphor West.
Camphor West. So, and even things like this is the skin or the outer shell off of black walnut. And there's medicinal uses for that. So there is. Lois
is liking what you're talking about, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, if you like what I talk about, then you need to head over to Bekka's Planet on YouTube. And I give all sorts of uses and remedies for herbs and maintaining your health. But these are just a few things.
She's a pretty smart girl.
These are just a few things that I use on a daily basis to keep my family healthy.
I think that anybody that wants to learn more about herbalism, please go follow her at Bekka's Planet. And check it out. She's got some really cool stuff that she goes over on there. Other than that,
herbalism is the people's medicine, and that's what I'm trying to do is give the medicine back to the people.
Well, this is Bill. That's Red.
I'm Red.
And this has been another great Facebook Live joint action with the Bekka's Planet. And we'll see y'all next time. Until then, adios.
Bye.